وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه أما بعد. Last Sunday, we talked about unity, we talked about social cohesion, we talked about the affairs of this ummah and the situation of this ummah, and how if we wanted to bring about change, we had to be unified ourselves. We talked about how we can create unity and social cohesion as an ummah, first in our families and then in our communities, through the means of boosting each other's morale. And the smallest way of doing that, but the most powerful in my opinion, which was back through the ahadith and the prophetic tradition, was to start by smiling. Today I wanted to talk about a hadith that's found in Sahih Bukhari, it's found in Sunan ibn Majah, you can also find it in Sunan al-Nasa'i and a few other books, where the setting is Yawm al-Qiyamah. And the believers, after going through the questioning and after going through all of the different trials and tribulations of Yawm al-Qiyamah, they're going to be going into Jannah. And as they're going into Jannah, some of the believers are going to stop back. And imagine you went through so much trials and so much difficulties on Yawm al-Qiyamah, and you're about to enter Jannah, something that you've worked for all your life. And then all of a sudden you stop. And so some of these believers will stop. And they're going to start arguing. In the hadith, it brings the word mujadala. Mujadala means arguing. They're going to start arguing with each other. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask them. He's going to say, hey, why are you guys arguing? I gave you guys Jannah, go into Jannah. And so they're going to say, رَبَّنَا كَانَ النَّاسِ يَصُلُّونَ مَعَنَا يُصَلُّونَ مَعَنَا وَيَصُومُونَ مَعَنَا وَيَحُجُّونَ مَعَنَا وَلَكِنْ أَدْخَلْتَهُمُ النَّارِ. Though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are people that we know that would be next to us in prayer. They would pray with us. They would fast with us. They would do hajj with us. They were there in the masjid. They were there when we were listening to the halaqat. We saw them in Mecca and we saw them in Medina. But however, Ya Allah, why did you put them into the hellfire? This is not justice. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, very beautifully and out of His mercy, He will say, اذهبوا فأخرجوا من قد عرفتهم. That He will tell them, oh, go to the hellfire. And whoever you recognize, pull them out. Whoever you recognize, pull them out. Imagine your state in the hellfire and imagine my state, or in Yawm al-Qiyamah, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for a good ending, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to enter us into Jannah. But we don't know what's going to happen. And so imagine you, na'udhu billah, you're there in the hellfire, and then all of a sudden you see this one person that you saw in the masjid, and he said, oh, I recognize you. You were there next to me in salah. Let me pluck you out. And that's the infinite mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's three morals that we can learn from this hadith, from the context of unity. Number one, we should be very careful of who we associate with. The same people who we associate with might drag us into hellfire, or they might be the same people who pluck us out. Or we may be the means of taking other people to hellfire, or we may be the means of taking other people out. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in His infinite mercy, will allow people from whom they know, based on who they are, to take people out or drag people in. And so that is how companionship works, and that is the strength of relationship. If you want to be a person who has a good outcome, then you should always be aware of who you deal with, who you associate with, who you're friends with. And this is first as a reminder to the youth. There's a lot of times when we have friends where they take us they end up, they're doing wrong things and we're there and we end up doing wrong things with them. And so if we have this far-sighted mindset, we would understand that these people are not good for us. And that brings us to another thing. If you want to be in good company, how could you be in good company if you're not a good person yourself? So it's a form of you have to self-rectify yourself in order to put yourself in good company. A lot of people, they'll come up to me and they'll ask me, oh Idris, there's a lot of people where, our friend group is just, they're all bad people. Like, I don't know how to come out of my friend group. They're just people who are always sinning and they always pull me into sin. So I tell them, if you rectify yourself, it comes a time where those people they disassociate from you themselves. And you start to disassociate from them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala easily replaces them with people who are far better in such a way where you won't even, be feeling any form of remorse or regret that you weren't with those people that you used to hang out with before. So that's the first thing. Try to be in good company, and in order to be in good company, rectify yourself. The second thing, try to be in good places. It's so beautiful that in the hadith, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala never said, go out and pluck the people who were your friends, or go out and pluck the people who were from your family. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala literally said, اذهبوا فأخرجوا من قد عرفتهم. Whoever you recognize. So it may be that you're in the masjid and the person who was next to you plucks you out. Or it may be that you are in a halaqah and the person who was listening next to you plucks you out. Just because they recognize you. And that's powerful. Because even if you can't find good friends, as long as you are in the right places, you are in the memory of those who also used to frequent those right places as well. So that's the second thing. Try to be in good places. The third thing, and the most important, and this is how we can bridge everything through the context of unity. It's as if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that true brotherhood, true sisterhood, true relationships that are everlasting and meaningful in the end are those that are built on the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we want unity, if we want social cohesion, which we always talk about in our communities, but at the same time, we are people who are disobedient to Allah, the relationships that we create will not end up in unity. That's not how they will end up. Because a relationship that starts with the displeasure of Allah always ends in a bad state. Which is why I always tell some of my friends who are talking to, people of the other gender, or they'll have girlfriends or they'll have boyfriends. They'll always bring the excuse of, hey, I'm talking to this girl because at the end I want to get married to her. And I always tell them that if your relationship starts with the displeasure of Allah, it's never going to end up right. And it always happens that way. They never end up marrying that person. There were 2 of my friends that did, and they got divorced within the span of 6 to 12 months. It's that every relationship that doesn't start with the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never end up in a good state. So if we want to build unity, we want to build social cohesion, we have to try to rebuild our relationships upon the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that's how we can bring unity, that's how we can bring social cohesion, and that's how we can bring change. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep us in good company. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us those whom we are always in good places. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us with those who are good people, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to unite us in this dunya and unite us in the hereafter. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم جزاكم الله خيرا. السلام عليكم.